Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Athena's Wellness Wisdom. This is going to be my fourth podcast. So, unlike the first three podcasts, where I interviewed people that had major parts in my healing journey, the people that really helped me with starting my healing journey, this podcast is a little bit different because it's just me here, and I just wanted to kind of talk to you all one on one, kind of explain my situation, let you get to know me a little bit better, and then just talk about some things that have been coming up recently. So, what inspired me to do this podcast specifically is I just came from 6 weeks of working on a show. For those of you that don't know, my full time job is, I guess I shouldn't say full time job, but my main job right now is in the film industry in the transportation department. And ever since I actually started the bulk of my healing, when I started that hypnotherapy with Jen Snow, I talk about that in my second podcast. Um, since then, I kind of have just been, for the last three major shows that I worked on, I worked in the office, which means that my hours were reduced and I did a lot more of the administration side of things. Whereas before that, and this last show that I just took on, I was actually right on set basically while we're filming and just driving all sorts of different vehicles. So one of the main reasons I haven't taken a show call like that where I'm back driving has mostly been because of my daughter. She's three, just about three now. So for those years, I wanted to really spend as much time at home with her as I could. So working in the office is a lot more reduced hours. Just for just to kind of as a little insight to let you know, like this last 6 weeks that I was working, I averaged around 75 hours a week at work. So, uh, and then from that, it's kind of interesting. um, Basically, the way I see it is I kind of got thrown into a little bit of a social experiment, is the way I can kind of look at it now. It was unintentional at the time when I took the job. The reason I took the job is that film industry has been a little bit slow, and so my husband and I haven't been making as much money as we need to. And with everything getting more expensive in life, this opportunity came up for me to do this show, so I decided I was going to take it. My daughter's a lot older now, so I don't feel like me I had to be home with her, for those hours. And it was only 6 weeks. So, yeah, so I decided to take this show call. And one of the main things that came up for me, um, I guess basically to let you know, like, if you listen back to my second podcast with Jen Snow, that's when I had started these hypnotherapy sessions. And that's when I would say that, my true healing journey got started and things kind of snowballed from there. And I was kind of on a bit of a positive trajectory of, changing changing some of my ways, becoming aware of some of my coping mechanisms, becoming aware of some of these patterns that I would fall into. Um, and I think that everybody can really relate. And I think the main point here to let you know right now and that I want to get across is that our healing is never going to be a linear progression. Really, we're human nature, all of nature kind of happens, in cycles, in waves, I could say. We get a little bit up here, and then something's gonna happen to kind of maybe bring us down a bit, and then we can come back up and kind of come down. So the six weeks that just passed really allowed me to kind of understand and get brought back into, some of my old ways, I guess I could say. Um, but coming back into it, it's very interesting too because I have done a lot of work. in the last few years. And I'm kind of at a point where I feel like I can be more of an observer of myself. I can kind of observe my triggers a little bit differently. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're completely gone and I don't get triggered again. So the film industry, and transportation, a lot of the film industry, but transportation especially, it's a very male dominated industry. And for any of you who might not know, from before I got into film, for the majority of my life, I worked with racehorses and specifically exercising racehorses. And that's also a very male driven industry. Um, Lots of people work with females and males work with horses, but to actually get on and exercise them, it can be perceived as a dangerous job. So lots of times it is more male driven. So jumping back in now to this last crew, I think we had around 30, I'd say an average of 20 to 30 drivers on our show, and I was the only female driver. It's not actually super common that I'd be the only female. Usually there's, at least one or two of the cast drivers tend to be female. But on this show, it was literally just me. So right away, when I got into that environment, it was a huge trigger for me. And especially with lots of the work I've done recently, lots of it kind of revolved around the fact that um, issues with my father, issues with growing up, when my mother passed away when I was 14, I ended up being the only girl in the family. I had two older brothers and my father. And right away, basically, I still remember one of the first things my dad saying to me, after a few days when the dishes and stuff and the laundry pile up, my dad would look at me and be like, Athena, aren't you going to do the laundry? Aren't you going to clean the dishes? You're the woman of the house now. It's your responsibility. So, right away, that hit quite a nerve with me, and it's kind of something ingrained in me that when I came back into this extremely male dominated um, situation, basically I was very on edge. Anytime any of the men said anything to me along the lines of, oh, shouldn't you be driving just the van instead of I was there driving some of the longer trucks and trailers and stuff like that. And it just kind of seemed like they expected me to just be driving a shuttle because, I'm a woman and that's all I can handle. But you know what? Not all of them were saying that. Some of that might not even cross some of the guys' minds, but for me internally, that's what I jumped on, and that's the reality I had in my mind. That all of these men thought that, I'm not good enough to be driving the big trucks and trailers and stuff like that. So it's very interesting at the beginning how, my old patterns and, this trauma from my childhood and being the only woman in my household and being expected to do the womanly things cycled back. And so, even though I'd say that I have a stronger awareness of these things now, at first in this situation, it definitely didn't hold. Like my awareness didn't matter at that time. So yeah, just an interesting kind of insight that I have. As I went further through, I kind of lessened my guard down a bit, and just I just realized some of the men just you know they didn't think that way at all. It was just my own reality imprinting that on the situation, which is pretty interesting. So another thing I noticed when I've told you guys I work these kind of crazy hours, you know, anywhere from 12 to 19 hours a day at work in this situation. Um, Being away from home, being away from my family, being away from my daughter, is very hard on me, and I found myself actually resorting back to some coping mechanisms that I used to use in the past. Um, Things that that I didn't feel like I needed anymore to that same degree, I was kind of slowly just started morphing back into it and relying on certain things. So, even though I was up here, it was slowly bringing me back, down to my old ways, down to using these coping mechanisms to kind of hide my true feelings. And I kind of, in this sense of knowing that it's only 6 weeks, I can get through it. Um, and, it's worth it. We need the money kind of thing. So just kind of letting you know, like when you're on your own healing journeys, like if you do kind of resort back to your old ways, it doesn't mean that you're going to stay there forever. It just means that this is what your body needs right now. And, it's okay. So it's interesting because, like I said, I had this awareness of this and I knew, some of these things that maybe I shouldn't be doing, but I allowed myself to do them anyways. And, and I don't beat myself up for it. There's certain things that maybe I would have done before that I didn't do, that, I was able to draw a line and stop myself from fully resorting back to my old ways. So, yeah, I found that quite interesting. And also, like, now that it's over, it's taken me a few days to really, get myself back to where I was and to kind of slow down with those coping mechanisms and to kind of extinguish them again and to, practice self-care. And the number one thing that I really needed to do was, I think the first day that I was home completely, I slept for about 11 hours straight. It's just that my body was just so, so deprived. And this kind of goes on to another thing of, what I've learned recently too with some of my studies and my schooling is how important sleep actually is for us and how important it is to let your body recover and give it that time that it needs. Um, your immune system, your memory gets so affected by lack of sleep. So, the whole film industry, it's kind of, it's very difficult the way that it's centered around, getting things done in this small amount of time. It's quite busy. And for all my friends in the film industry who continue to do these shows after again and again and again, like just think about what it's really doing to your overall health. And you really just got to know that it's okay to take a show, but you need to take a break in between. I mean, the way I just described it before, you're pretty much doing two jobs in one. So I worked for this 6 weeks, you pretty much take 6 weeks off and just recover and then maybe jump on another one. I'm grateful that you don't know until you actually start on day one, but I should be able to have an office job coming available again, because I know from my own personal self, I can see, even just in the 6 weeks, how far down I came from where I was, that taking these show calls really isn't isn't beneficial for me, isn't sustainable for my body and my lifestyle and where I want to be and where I want to keep my energy and my vibration and, my ambition. I want it to stay up here. And even though I'm making really good money for the time that I'm doing this type of work, I know that really you need to find that balance. And yeah, it was literally, like I said, just a very interesting experiment, you know. Yeah, so I think that's kind of all I have to say for today. I just really wanted to come on and just talk about that and just really, like I said, in summary, just letting people know that healing and our lives in general are not linear, you know. It's not always just going to go up, 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 up. It can only do so for a certain amount. And then as life happens, we're going to dip down and then we're going to come up again and maybe a little bit higher and dip down and come up again a little bit higher. And that's truly the goal, you know, the goal towards enlightenment and just living the best life that you can. So don't get discouraged if where you're at right now isn't as high as you once were. Just know that it doesn't mean that you're never going to get back up there again, but just try to keep that awareness and just yeah, another part of this whole the 6 weeks was like sometimes I felt like I was witnessing myself, kind of an out of body, like out of reality experience. Um, because I can I could still sense what was going on in my body. I could sense I knew these coping mechanisms that maybe weren't the greatest, and even if I still fell into it a little bit, it was very interesting to kind of be the observer of it all as well. So, needless to say, I'm very happy that it's done for now. Overall, it was fun. Overall, I did learn new things about myself and, and about kind of how some of my past issues can really just skew my own reality of the situation. And that happens to everybody, it's really what trauma is. And, the issues that we present right now in the present, so much of it just has to do with our childhood and, our early years growing up. So thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you got something out of this. And until next time, bye, everyone.